All right, getting started on the roof here. And after some thought, I thought it would be best to start with these rear tubes. And basically what I targeted here is I want the roof to be narrower. And how much narrower, I thought about a measurement across, but it's kind of hard to visualize that. So what I did instead is actually set this at an angle. So I laid it in 10 degrees. Let's see, it's all notched here real nice over those two. And then here, use my digital angle finder to make sure it's at 90. So my vision is I'll match this tube on the other side, then make the bent here that sets the roof line. And the overall height, basically I went floor to under the roof bar in my current Jeep and reference basically the seat mounting tab. And then I subtracted about 1.5 inches out of the tube height, which I think is going to work just fine with the seating position. So it's potentially a little higher than it has to be, but we're going to find out. So I'm going to make that tube for the other side. Part of my goal was to have a roof line that was, a little different than everything you see. So what I did to do that is this front end is a couple inches lower than the rear, so it'll slope up a little bit. Not drastically. I think some cars get a little goofy when they do that, but kind of liking this roof line. I think it's kind of neat. Some cars are sloped more like that, but kind of digging this. And part of what I want out of the car is I want a flat roof because I don't want to have to bend the roof panel. I learned that on some previous cages. I don't want that. So I want flat roof, which will have a nice long flat roof. And then with this relatively short bend, picture there's going to be a horizontal cross tube there, and then the dash bars will come down nearly parallel, whereas if you stick them at a real steep angle and you have a long bend, then that cross tube has to be real far back and they have to come real far inside the cage. Not sure that makes any sense, but anyway, I think this looks pretty cool. Got our rear tubes approximately 10 degrees in. The tubes up front are following that plane as best as I can eyeball right now. But next, I'll make the cross tube that fits back here, and I'll make an identical one that fits up there, and that'll let me kind of pull the whole thing together. And then I can fine tune all the angles and make sure it's all good. Before I get too far attaching the roof and doing all that kind of stuff, I wanted to do a seat check just to make sure I didn't mess up some dimensions. I'm gonna have a helmet crashing into the roof bars. Basically where the seat sits, I've got 9 inches from the top of the seat to the bottom of the top tube, which is good. That's where it's basically at in my TJ. But this roof does slope down so that, about where your head is going to be a little bit closer. Good news there is besides my Aerospace Tech 2x4s and 1x4s, the seat will sit about 1.5 inches lower. I could potentially get it 2 inches lower, but I think about 1.5 inches lower is going to be plan A, and that should be right where it needs to be. The cabs feels a bit long. It's pretty spacious, which, pros and cons to that. I think it'll be a pretty comfortable car. Maybe not as nimble trail car as I had expected, but that's okay. The dash, it's a little deceiving because that tube right there is really going to be over the top of the motor. That's not actually going to be the dashboard bar or anything like that. That'll be closer to here, but we'll see how it all shakes out. All right, so spent a fair time getting the angle of those tubes just right. Both sides are even. Used the ratchet strap to get a little diagonal to help pull it. But I like get a good angle for it there. I like the rake that it's laid in. The rear's a little cattywampus, don't worry about that because it's not set yet. And I'll explain why. So this top tube in the front is tacked. The rear tubes need to be squared and those arms need to be verified that they're at all the right angles. So I decided that getting the front together would be simpler. So I started with that. So I put a little bit of weld on each of the A-pillar bars and got the cross tube tacked in. Now to add some stability to the front here, I'm gonna go ahead and put the windshield bars in. Gonna be something like that. And this is gonna help tie the front of the cage together, but still give me enough room to wiggle the back of it. Because ultimately I need to be able to knock that top B-pillar bar out to get the roof bars in. So that's kind of the order of operation. I verified that these are at the right angle. I put a little more weld on them. I got them straight up and down where I want them to be here, or at least they're matching each other. That top bar, I spent some time getting it squared and squaring it up to the front crossbar. So now I'm working on my first diagonal. Gonna be here, and you'll see what I go there. So I try and get it to where I land on the easier of the two tubes, because coping to this would be very difficult. Coping to this, less steep angle, not as bad. But then I'll take some out of there so that it tucks up against this tube and has a little bit of weld surface in there. Back there, kind of a similar story. We just got a lot of tubes coming together all at once. This is the roof structure I want to do. So this tube here is tying in the windshield bars. Diagonal's keeping the top square. I think it's real common to just overdo the top section of the car like crazy. Obviously you can, do a full X here, all kinds of spider web, make it nice and strong, but I'm trying to keep weight at the top of the car down. So I'm trying to think very specifically about that. And I think where this is positioned, it's gonna work real good. And that diagonal where the bend in the cage is, there's gonna be another bar that comes down to the bend in the chassis. So it's gonna be plenty strong. That's gonna be enough tubes to keep rocks off your head if you roll it down a hill. So now starting to work on the rear bars here. And you'll see this is spread a little bit wider than these bottom two, and that's because I'm gonna stick a vertical right in the middle and see how it turns out. Gonna end the chassis development here. Obviously missing one tube and some gusseting and stuff here, but the main cab is done and I'm pretty much out of tube here, and I wanna start getting the drivetrain mocked up.